What is up, plant people? It's time once more for the Planthropology Podcast, the show where we dive in the lives and careers of some very cool plant people to figure out why they do and what keeps them coming back for more. I'm Vikram Baliga, your host and humble guide in this journey through the sciences, and as always, my dearest friends, I am just so darn excited to be with you today, and we have got a good one for you today. Do you know what lo-fi is? Think of like a cozy video game that you cuddle up on the couch with a blanket and grab a cup of tea or coffee and go to town on either pruning some roses or making an island and being forever beholden to a tanuki or something like that. And you're in the ballpark. Well, it's wonderful, it's jazzy, and my guest today is a producer of exactly that. So today you're going to hear from a musician and a music industry expert named Roey, and I would give you his government name, but I don't want to because Roey is such a great name. So Roey works again in the music industry, and he produces great lo-fi and brings in his passion for native plants and for landscapes and for conservation into it. So he actually raises money to buy wildflower seed and remediate different pieces of land and do so much cool stuff through his music. And I want to let him tell you more about it, so I'm not going to talk too much more about it. But Roey and I have been friends for a little while. We met, I think, on Instagram, and I think just have a lot of shared interests and a lot of shared life experience. And I had so much fun getting to talk to him today. So I don't want to ruin the surprise and this great conversation. So let's get into it. So grab some headphones, turn on the dad jazz, cozy up on the couch, and get ready for episode 115 of the Planthropology Podcast, Native Landscapes, Lo-fi dad jazz, and the rungs on the ladder. All right. Well, Rooey, thanks for being on today.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so excited to get to talk to you. We've been sort of internet friends for a while, and it's always fun getting to like meet people that I enjoy talking to and actually get to talk sort of face to face.
Yeah,
So
thanks for having me. It's definitely weird to like, or maybe weird's not the right word, but fun to like meet people that the algorithm, for lack of a better term, brought together, right? Like, I think the algorithm gets a lot of hate, but it also does some good stuff sometimes. So I'm glad to be friends and be talking in sort of real life, almost real life, as close as it gets, right?
as close as it gets. Yeah, from a distance for sure. Well, tell us about yourself. Where'd you grow up? What'd you study? What are you into?
Yeah. So I grew up in Los Angeles and lived in, what was at the time of essentially like a sheep herding town north of Los Angeles. Like we used to shut down Main Street for a couple days every year and herd, 10,000 head of sheep through town. And then over time, it, continued to grow as California has. And I eventually found my way up to Northern California, and I met my wife there. When did we meet? What year is it now? Where am I in time and space? I know we've been married for 13 years. So a minute ago, just like a short jaunt ago, we met in Northern California, and we met at a ministry school.
Okay.
And then from there, we moved to Portland, Oregon. And I worked in live sound and production, things like that, before slowly, finding my way into music marketing. And so for like the last 15 years, I've worked for mostly major labels and like large entertainment companies doing marketing. Nothing exciting in marketing. It's mostly like ad buying and like data analysis stuff. So nerdy stuff, but fun stuff for me. And then we moved here to Nashville in 2018. We have 2 kids and we have family out here, and I work in the music industry. And so I was constantly traveling out here, and we just finally were like, we're doing life on hard mode. And so we moved from Portland, Oregon, which we love Portland, Oregon, but it's impossible to have a vegetable garden there because your growing season is very short and everything is dark all the time. So I've really loved living in Nashville because we have a super long growing. I don't know how dissimilar it is to where you are, but our growing season is super long, and we get lots of really heavy rainstorms. So there's not like a ton of need for irrigation and things like that. And you just kind of put it in like, if you don't plant something in the ground here, something will grow. It's usually stuff you don't want. So we do lots of gardening as a result. And yeah, that we've really loved gardening here. That being said, I've had a garden bed in my parents' garden since I was 5, right? We have always had huge gardens, and whether it's ornamentals or vegetables or a mixture thereof. And even when my wife and I were young and married and living in apartments, and we would rent community garden plots in Portland and try to grow stuff. So like we've always been gardeners. And I guess all this meandering intro to say is like what leads to the current iteration of Rooey, if you will, is, a few years ago, I realized I started working in the music industry because I want to make music. And instead I was like a full-on label suit, making spreadsheets and doing, nothing. I hadn't picked up a guitar in a long time. And so I decided, well, shoot, I'll just start releasing music. And it feels a little bit like cheating when I work for Universal Music Group and Sony, and I know how the algorithms work. Mm-hmm. And so I just kind of like, I was sitting with my dad one day and we were just father-son rambling together. And he was like, why don't you use music to raise money to fund your gardening stuff? I think I was talking about how expensive raised beds were with him or something.
Yeah.
And it planted the seed, if you will. Am I allowed to make puns and metaphors?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Cool. The more, the better. Perfect. Absolutely.
And so the more I thought about it, the more I realized, yeah, I should do that. And it just naturally evolved into, like, I have a very busy work life and I also have 2 kids, and I would like to continue to stay married to my wife. So like all these things take time. And so I don't have a ton of time to like brand and market and think through stuff. So it naturally evolved into this, like, well, I love plants. I love native plants. I love ecology. I love environmental conservation. I grew up in Boy Scouts too. So like, we're always like way out in the middle of nowhere, just like 4 days into the woods, and starting to see and understand what untouched nature can be. And then you come back into urban environments and you're like, well, there's still foxes and hawks and all of that's still here. It's just struggling. And so it just became this like obvious thing to turn this Rooey project into. I name all of my songs, for the most part, at least the ones that I own 100% of, right? Into, we name them all after native plants. Generally, I think there are a couple that are like a zinnia. They're native to Texas. They're not native to.
Yeah, right. A couple of species are for sure.
Yeah, it's, the longer the project's gone on, the more of a purist I've become about it. And so we're naming them after native plants. And then the fun thing is all the money that I generate with the project either goes into helping the songs reach new listeners. And then the difference is we're buying plants. Mostly I'm buying seeds from, there's a company up in Kentucky called Roundstone. That's like a native plant seed farm. They're amazing. And they're like a hour-and-a-half drive around there for us. And so we'll go up all the time and just hang out in their farm and look at all the rose mallow or whatever. They've got, I think it's like 110 acres of native plants.
Oh, wow.
It's not open to the public, but they also don't care if you show up. And well, I shouldn't say that. I don't speak for Roundstone. You should
maybe call
ahead. But there is like an office there that you can go in. They have a little shop that you can go into. I don't think they want people just like showing up and wandering their farm. But every time I have shown up, there's somebody there and I ask, hey, do you mind if I walk around? And they're the nicest. I mean, people in Kentucky are always nice. So it is. Generally speaking, most people in Kentucky are really nice. As always are exceptions, but generally speaking.
This will play well with my Kentucky audience, which I think is about 7 people.
Well, so maybe we can get you up to an even 10.
I would love that. Yeah. Round numbers are great. So just to take a little bit of a step back, that's so interesting. So like you don't have like formal education in plants and ecology. That's sort of like a labor of love, right? It is
my ADHD hyperfixation. Right. Because I spend so much time online, the more opportunity I have to be offline, I take. Mm-hmm. And so that is either gardening or it's reading, right? It's going to the library. Now, that being said, I will say that like during COVID, I ended up making friends with our local ag department because I registered as like a seed seed retailer. And we grew a bunch of plant starts, and that opened us up into, like, I went through the University of Tennessee's Master Gardener program. And, we've been kind of in relationship and connection with stuff like that. But no, I don't have formal training in any of it. It's all just like my parents were avid gardeners. My dad is like, a really staunch conservationist and wants to preserve natural spaces. We grew up, all our family vacations were like in the national parks all throughout California. And so it's like, it's just who we are. But no, I went to a couple of years of Bible college that isn't accredited anymore, which is so great. You love that. And then, I've just ended up in marketing. I think I started buying Facebook ads in 2009. And it,
wow,
since
early adopter.
Yeah. When the ads were only allowed in the right column.
Right. So I remember that well.
So it's been a while. So I've I just have experienced my way into a career, and sometimes I question why I did that.
There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's interesting because I talk to a lot of people that get so like, I don't know, down, again, to use a pun, down in the weeds with some of the like science stuff. And I'm like, well, have you grown anything? And they're like, no, I don't do that. The one thing that I think is really interesting as I've been doing this show over the years is there's so many ways to like get into nature, right? To experience it, to find the love for it. And I think we need all of that.
Yeah.
I think we need everyone that like comes to it in different ways because all those perspectives are so helpful.
Well, and I think too, like there's like a big thing about like the reason why I even picked lo-fi in the first place is because I'm a perfectionist, right? And the whole point of lo-fi is like, it's supposed to be kind of crappy, right? It's supposed to like, if it sounds a little warbly, if you didn't make it perfect, like that's just being authentic to the genre. And I've had to really push myself to accept this idea of done is better than perfect. And that the reality of life is that the bottom rungs of the ladder are just as important to get to the top. Right. And so, have I had a formal education in stuff? No, but I think that you're right that I love connecting with people that have. I love like benefiting from the research and the science that's out there. I am a nerd. I do read research papers. I do cheat a little bit sometimes and ask ChatGPT to explain it to me if I don't understand it. So, I think that the plant community is exactly that. It is a community of people that come from all different walks of life and experiences. And some of that experience is, lived experience. Like I've killed more plants than I've helped live. And some of that is through, people who just read the books and write the papers and understand what xylem is.
Well, that's from my, I guess, experience explaining it to people what xylem is like 80% of my job is like talking to students. It's like, they're like veins. And it's like, so they have hearts? No.
It's like a hydraulic system.
Yeah.
Right. Is that it?
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, it's interesting. So for the uninitiated, if you could put lo-fi in a nutshell, how would you explain lo-fi to like an alien that showed up and was like, what am I listening to?
Lo-fi can be a lot of things, right? What it's become in the modern era is kind of like bedroom pop made on a laptop without lyrics, right? It's traditionally it's instrumental music that's, you're going to have lower tempos. It's calmer. The stuff that I make is more of what we would call dad jazz. I draw a lot of influences from Muzak, right? I don't know if maybe your listeners are old enough to remember Muzak, but Muzak, I think still to this day is one of the most profitable music brands ever.
Is it really?
They have a whole like skyscraper in downtown LA. They like, if I'd have to look up I should have looked up some Muzak fun facts. I used to have a bunch of them on speed dial, but every shopping center in America used to have Muzak in it. Every Kmart, every Walmart, Muzak used to provide it. So it was a brand. And basically the idea of kind of what I put out and Muzak is just like music that is not offensive to listen to. It may not be an earworm in particular, but that's kind of the point. It is there so that we don't have to sit with the painful silence of the room. But we also like, if I'm sitting at my desk and working or I'm reading a book, I might want some music on because my mind is prone to wander. I don't know about yours, but like,
Oh yeah.
I
Yes.
have to change the light bulb and I need to overseed or whatever. There's always like some random thing that's happening in my brain. So having some music on is a little bit helpful. But if it has lyrics, now I'm thinking about what they're singing about. So lo-fi really sits in that space where it's like it's enjoyable to listen to. It's not bad music by any stretch of the imagination. On the other side of it, you have guys like Jay Dilla who really helped pioneer how do we subdivide and like where the beats sit in hip hop and things like that. Lo-fi means low fidelity, though, is ultimately what it is. And people would create lo-fi on little cassette players, or they'd use Roland makes this thing called an SP404. They're essentially like little beat machines that you can grab samples, which would be like a quick clip from a song. And then maybe you'd reverse it, or maybe you'd affect it in some way and turn that into a rhythm or a groove or a melody or a beat. So lo-fi is essentially just instrumental music. It's a pretty broad genre, like any genre ends up becoming, but it's generally just like soft, relaxing instrumental music that has some sort of jazz or hip hop influence involved in it.
I dig it. So like, it's interesting that some of the things you said, because my son definitely has some like ADHD going on, and he comes by it honestly.
Yeah.
Like it is his inheritance from both his mom and I. And so like sometimes when he's trying to go to bed, like he can't sleep because his brain will not shut up.
Yeah.
Like it just like goes a million miles an hour. So the past few weeks we got him a little speaker, and he's just been listening to lo-fi when he goes to sleep. And like it has and I say this like completely honestly, like it's revolutionized his like sleep.
Yeah.
Just because it like, I guess, fills that little spinning part in his brain.
Yeah. Now I'm thinking about what's the drum doing, or what's like it very much brings you into like that present moment, right?
Yeah.
Where I'm like, it's just me here with that song and whatever I'm doing, whether it's sleeping, whether it's, filling seed trays, whatever, you name it.
Yeah, he likes Nintendo lo-fi, Nintendo themed lo-fi.
Yes.
So like we've got this long playlist. It'll be like, that's the Ocarina of Time.
Yes.
Like that is
honestly, that's some of my favorite as well. It feels like that wheelhouse is thoroughly cluttered with great artists making that stuff. So I've not ventured into it. But every now and again, I'm like, I should do like a bunch of Zelda songs or we're big Nintendo fans in our house. So we are.
Oh yeah. Like I don't think we've ever gotten as much mileage on a piece of tech that I've ever bought as our Switch.
Yes.
Like we have worn that thing out.
We have worn it out. We eventually got a second one that we are currently wearing out. And, I think we're playing our 14th or 15th playthrough of Luigi's Mansion right now.
There you go.
We're Luigi's Mansion 2, if we're going to be specific. So
I think we should be.
My son is 7, so he still like hasn't fully, it's starting to form, but like the what happens next part of the brain isn't there yet. So to him, it's just like the first playthrough. To me, I'm done. Ready. It's ready for a new game.
The shine's worn off, hadn't it?
Yeah. I mean,
just
it's
a little bit.
But yeah, I'm ready for something. We just did Donkey Kong Country, I think is the one that they just re-released for the Switch. And that one was not my favorite until we were about 2/3 of the way through. It's just hard. I'm not good at video games, right? Let's be honest. I'm not, I make music, but it's all in software and I do it one bar at a time and it takes a while, right? We're not flirting.
And by the way, if you're listening, this episode is not sponsored by Nintendo, but it could be.
We would very much like that.
That would not hurt my feelings if, we'll work on that. We played, one of our favorite games was Mario Odyssey. Yeah. That's a winner.
Yeah, that is probably next in the rotation, if we're being honest. Yeah. We just kind of cycle through our games until he earns enough lawnmower money to buy a new one.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. So interesting. And that kind of, just to think through some of this, like that space too of like different things you can do, and some of these cozy games that fill that, in my mind, a similar like sort of niche in people's brains sometimes. It's like lo-fi music. I had a guest last year on the show who actually produced a gardening game called Garden Life.
Oh yeah, I have played that game.
It's fun, and you just go prune roses, and it's very kind of like mindless and great.
Yes, that is 100% what I need video games to be.
Yeah. So thinking about some of the like wildflower work you do, it's really cool that you're finding different ways to fund this, because I think that's a sticking point for a lot of people is I would love to be more into native plants and more into nature, but like I can't afford it. I can't like
Yeah.
whatever. You found a really creative way. I don't want to say to fund your habit, but to fund your
That's
native
what it
plant habit.
is. Yeah, that's really what it is. Yeah, I mean, gardening is expensive, and I think at least where we're at, like we've taken where I'm almost at a place to grow stuff because obviously, like I'm not a big fan of the lawn culture in the South. I mean, it's kind of all of America, and so I also just I would if I have to do gardening in the South during August and July, I would rather not be pushing a lawnmower. I
Yeah.
would rather be, pruning something or harvesting hop. Like we have hops and we have lots of fruit trees. We just put in 3 pawpaws and I'm gonna convince my wife to let me put in 2 more so we can have 5. It just doesn't look even yet. So
Agree.
yeah. But we have about 4,000 square feet of wildflower right now.
Wow.
We have 1,500 in the front and then the rest is in the back. And some of it's just like we lucked out. We just have like a really slopey property, which is nice because we'll never flood. It will always run away from us. But I don't want to mow it. And like I said earlier, if you don't grow something, something will grow whether you want it to or not in the South.
Sure.
And so I just a couple of years ago was like, well, we're going to do all wildflowers there. And so the benefit is I don't have much of a habit that needs to be fed in my own yard anymore. So the bonus now is we live in South Nashville here. And so it's a little bit of a rough community. We are literally on the wrong side of the tracks. We don't get a lot of resources and support from city infrastructure. And so there's a lot of just like hell strips and roadside stuff and ditches that are filled with trash and litter, and they get bush hogged once or twice a month, and it's gross and ugly. So we've been working with just reaching out to the city and asking, hey, can we plant something else there? And a lot of it gets pushed back and they're like, well, we don't have budget for it, or who's going to maintain it. Mm-hmm. And then the neat thing about the native plant aspect is, well, I'll plant it. You don't have to pay for it. I'll plant it. And because it's native, you don't have to maintain it, right? That it's what is supposed to grow there. And then you always get the pushback of, well, it's going to get long and tall. And so you get into the dialogue of all the benefits that native plants have in terms of the phytoremediation, where they're actually helping to pull out all the runoff and the oil and the pollutants and stuff from getting further downstream. They're going to stop and stay there. And the thing that I love about Nashville is that they actually listen.
That's cool.
Yeah. And our little neighborhood that we live in, we're all very active in our community, and we talk to each other and we set up meetings with our city council person and we do all that stuff. And we kept having like flooding and things like that in our neighborhood because there's a big creek that runs through it. And so we actually were able to convince the city. There was like a bunch of like rundown rental homes. A couple of years ago, we convinced the city to buy them all from their owners and just convert it into a riparian zone. And so, yeah. And that has like almost 100% alleviated flooding on the creek. Like crazy. The floodplain, like I think people just don't understand. We're on a rabbit trail, but we're going to go there. I think that people don't understand that the point of the way that water gets into a creek and gets into a river isn't by just rolling over the surface of the ground. Mm-hmm. It is by absorbing into the ground and then being filtered through the ground and gravity pulling it down into a creek or into a river. And so we put all this stuff on top of the part of the ground that's supposed to absorb the water. And then it gets into the creek way faster than it should. And then that's where we end up with flooding issues. But then when we have these things like, blue stem and gamma grass and these deep root, coneflowers, all of these like prairie plants, they are designed to go super deep into the ground. And then that creates a pathway for water to go in when it rains. And they do a really good job of catching that trash before it ends up in the creek, before it ends up down, we're on the Cumberland River. And so, having all those wildflowers on the side of the road or in that ditch, yes, somebody's going to have to mow it. If somebody's mowing it twice a month or once a week in the long season anyways, why not mow it once a month and give it a nice Chelsea chop, right? Instead of cutting it all the way down to the ground, just cut it down to like 6 to 10 inches off the ground, it'll come back and it'll catch litter and debris and act as a filter. And then it's also bolstering the local ecosystem, right? It's giving birds and bees and wasps and ladybugs and fireflies and all of those things a place to live and eat and succeed. And that ends up being better for our community.
That's awesome. And you were talking about lawns and stuff earlier, and like I think they have their place to a certain extent, but where we are here, we're more southwest than south. So, we're up here on like a high elevation prairie essentially, but we get like 19 inches of rain, right? Like we're dry. This year it's going to be less than that, I'm pretty sure. Like I remember 2011 or so, we got like 4 inches of rain all year, and it was awful. And it was like 112 degrees all summer. Like it was bad,
hard pass,
real bad.
Hard pass.
Yeah, no thanks. Like there's days that I'm like, why do I live here? Why I could move, I could go anywhere, but I know. So when we think about like plants for the landscape, sometimes I think a lot of folks are like, we should do our landscape more like Dallas, where they get rain and it's humid, than El Paso, where they don't get rain. When really we should be thinking, okay, what works in El Paso where it's dry, maybe a better choice for us. And so from an educational standpoint, like we do a lot of like, hey, here are the benefits of native plants and native wildflowers. They're beautiful. These grasses are great. You could do buffalo grass and curly mesquite and all of these different things. Side oats grama, black grama, blue grama. Like there's so many. And like you're saying, you mow them a couple times a season just because whether they need it or not, I guess.
Yeah.
And then you go on with your life. And I think there's, I've spent most of my career in water and landscape, and I see a shift. It's just that ship turns so slowly sometimes. We get into this idea of this is what a landscape is supposed to look like. And then we get bogged down,
It's fair to say that what we think is landscaping, I think oftentimes we like to think that we have curated this aesthetic when corporate America has really done a lot of that, and the lawn culture in America, it makes companies big money. And ultimately, when you start getting in it, like in my driveway, I've got a huge heap of wildflowers that I cut down late fall, early winter, that we're going to use to reseed a couple sites that we're working on right now. When you start getting into native plants and perennial plants, you start to realize like there is a point where this like abundance thing kicks in where I don't, we're 3 years into the Rooey project. I'm starting to run out of things to spend money on because the sites are providing enough to then create new sites and continue this cycle thing. Whereas if we're doing a lawn or a traditional garden, we're doing, I definitely have a few annuals that are my favorite, but like if I could plant a perennial, I would rather a perennial have it come back year after year and get better and better over time. That's just not good business. Right. If I've got to weed and feed my lawn instead of slowly converting it to, some other, like, I don't really have a specific turf in my front yard. Obviously, is it Michael Pollan that said lawns should be an area rug, not wall to wall carpet? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And so it's like, that's how we treat our lawns. Like, obviously we need somewhere to like lay down and look at the clouds, and the dogs need somewhere to run and catch the ball, and the kids, we got a swing set. We have all that stuff. But like this idea of having edge to edge short turf grass, that looks fine on a golf course because that's the purpose of it, right? I'm not a big golf fan, but I understand like that's a thing and people like it, and whatever gets you outside. It is nice to start. I know a lot of the courses in our area are starting to incorporate native plants into them. That's always you're like, yes, I like that.
Yeah, it's super cool.
But like, you don't need to maintain stuff at the same level when you're investing into a long-term ecosystem, right? And that ultimately is not good business for lawn care companies, for Scott's, for all the things that we didn't feed. And so, maybe I'm showing that I'm a crunchy hippie. I'm not like a super crunchy hippie. I'm a really weird enigma. Like, we're all fully vaccinated. Yeah. We believe in science.
We contain multitudes, right?
Yeah, I'm an enigma maybe. So yeah, I think it's just like we have been taught to think that the particular aesthetic of American gardens is the that's the best way to do it. And the reality is that there's no one way to do it, right? My garden, to some people come, like our front yard, our installation of wildflowers in the front doesn't, like, we just took a big seed mix, and I think there's something like 22 or 23 different natives. And I just mixed up a pound of wildflower seeds and some sand, and we just threw it. And we just said, whatever grows, right? Whatever. And we're just going to let nature do the thing. Not that nature really has 27 different seeds in one spot at one time. That's not really how it works, but like we pretend.
Yeah, it's closer.
Yeah. And so we ended up with a lot, like the bearded beggar ticks were really tall. The Illinois bundleflower really took off. What else was, partridge peas were insane. And by July, it was 7 feet tall, right?
Wow.
And it was great. I loved it. My wife is ready for it to be like yarrows and coneflowers and short stuff. But the reason we did it too is like we live on it's a cut through street in our neighborhood. It's not like a main street, but it gets really busy and cars move really fast, and we have young kids. And so like, how do we create a natural barrier between the street and our kids, right? And so I just planted basically a moat of wildflowers.
I like that actually a lot.
I think that more people should do it. By late July, it was just this like 7 foot tall sea of yellow that was just like, when you walked up to it, it almost sounded like there was an electrical problem nearby, because it's just so active with bees and buzzing. Yeah, it's like such a cool sensory experience to like walk up to this little island of wildflowers in a, otherwise we have a lot of renters and there's not a lot of landscaping on our street. It's like cars on lawns and stuff like that. And then you just have this huge, 1,500 square foot of 7 foot tall yellow flowers. And to some people, they don't like it. It's not their thing, right? And that's okay. I think that gardens get to look like however the gardener that is tending it wants to. And for me, my personal approach is that we are not apart from nature, we're a part of it. And so the space around my home isn't necessarily supposed to be an extension of that like super clean, tidy, homogenized thing that's on the inside, right? Like we vacuum, it's not like I have a bunch of bugs in my house and it's like, it's clean and tidy in my house, but we also don't do pest control outside of our house. And I enjoy the fact that there's a den of possums in my backyard right now. And my dogs are having to go to the bathroom in the front yard right now, and they don't like that, but that's what it is, because we get this opportunity. Like I get this opportunity to have this space to interface with nature, and I don't have to go to, the local state park to do that. I can do it right here in urban Nashville. And we have foxes and possums and raccoons. And unfortunately we saw a bear a couple weeks ago, which is really fascinating, but also like, I don't want to live where I have to like worry about bears in my trash can. Like I already look outside of my house for like sketchy people before I go out there. I don't want to also now have to look for bears, but like we are a part of nature, and nature, it's all in our communities anyways. And so it's been really neat to like, I don't care. We don't have an HOA obviously in our neighborhood. So I don't care what it looks like to other people. I care what kind of things I get to find in my yard. I care, our tomatoes and our vegetables always do amazing. And we don't spray anything at all. Every now and again, I'll do neem. Like if we have powdery mildew, I may do, it depends on if I catch it at the right time, like spinosad on the blossoms of our fruit trees early on to prevent for any kind of worms or moths. But generally we just let everything take care of everything. And I don't have crazy big spiders in my house. I've never gotten bit or stung by a wasp. They're here, but like, they're all so interested in what's happening in the patch.
I think that's really interesting that you say that, because I think people freak out about stuff like bees. Oh, there's bees and wasps near my house. I'm like, yeah, but they don't have anything else to do. They're bored. Yeah. So you go outside and like, you're an immediate threat. right? Like to the hive, to the
They're
whatever.
hungry. They're,
Yeah,
they're in fight or flight mode because they don't have a thriving ecosystem that they're a part of. They're struggling in this desert of biodiversity in urban environments.
absolutely. And so you give them essentially something to do. You let them exist like and they don't care about you. They don't want to bother you. They just want to go about their thing and find food and exist, right?
Yeah.
And I think you're right. It's interesting. I haven't really chased down this like thought process before, but it's really fascinating to me because we talk a lot about like you're talking about bear, right? And how urban sprawl and things, we tend to think about that in terms of like, oh, I saw a coyote, I saw a fox, I saw a bear, and they're not acting like they're supposed to because they're in the city and they don't know what to do with that. I don't think we extend that very often to insects and to smaller animals when it's really the same concept, right? They're under stress, they're out of their native habitat, they don't like evolutionarily have the tools to handle that well. And so if we give them something to, I don't know, feel like home, essentially.
I mean, I think a lot of instability in the world comes from food insecurity and housing insecurity, right? Why, if humans have that experience, why wouldn't the rest of the living organisms have that same experience too?
We're all after the same thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, biologically, at a fundamental level, we are all like trying to reproduce and survive, right? So whether you're a little tiny organism or a wasp or a human, there are needs that look different, but fundamentally they are the same thing. We need to eat. We need to have a place to like live that beautiful life full of meaningful connections. And, if they don't have it, then they're stressed. And that comes out in being a jerk.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I tell you what, this seems like a great place for a quick mid-roll. So let's go do that stuff and take a break. And when we come back, we'll talk more about native plants and conservation and how all of this fits together. Well, hey there. Welcome to the mid-roll. I'm so glad you're here. Tell your houseplants I love them and give them just the tiniest little pat on the head for me. If you're noticing that the mid-roll music is different this week, it's because it is. This is actually a song called Yarrow by Rooey himself, and it's jazzy and it's awesome. I love it so much. So go check him out on Spotify and all the players and listen to more of his music. But I think we're going to start using some Rooey originals for our mid-roll music instead of the jaunty elevator music that I normally go with. Hey, thanks so much for being a part of Planthropology and for listening this far. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. I know I have. Thanks to the Texas Tech Department of Plant and Soil Science for supporting the show, letting me do the thing. Thanks to Rooey for agreeing to be on, but mostly, as always, thanks to you for being part of the Planthropology family. If you want to support Planthropology, there's a lot of ways to do it. You can follow along on social media, all the places as Planthropology or Planthropology Pod. I am the Plant Prof all over the internet. If you want to ask questions, shoot me an email at planthropologypod@gmail.com. Let me know your thoughts, episode ideas, all of that. Leaving a rating and review for the show wherever you can, Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Podchaser or anywhere else, is a big help. It's great social proof, and it lets me know that you're listening and that you're enjoying what you're hearing. But the best way to probably support the show is to tell a friend about it. Tell them how much you enjoy it and get them interested in plants and nature. If you would like to financially support the show, you can go to planthropologypodcast.com, check out some merch, or go to buymeacoffee.com/planthropology. And for the price of a cup of coffee, you can pay for hosting fees, I guess, but mostly coffee. So I'm going to let you listen to this rad dad jazz for a couple more seconds, and then we'll jump in to part 2 of the episode. Let's do it. Just to go back to a point you made earlier that, you have a place to go experience all these things and your kids and your family. But also, I think a big theme of this season is going to be community. And just think about what you're doing for the community too. And whether or not you ever get the neighbors' kids that are like, hey, we love that you have giant sunflower, yellow flowers. I think that they wouldn't get to see that.
Right.
Because like you said, like there's this idea that we have to go to find nature. And in a lot of communities, people don't have the means for that.
Yeah.
So having access to nature is sort of like this radical community building that I think is so cool.
It really is. And I think so much about just the way, I'm not saying it's on purpose, but like it does feel like we are taught to feel so separate from nature. And so, a lot of the installations that we do with the Rooey project are at schools. Those are the easiest people to get to say yes, right? Because it's like, hey, can I come and do, over the weekend, I'll put in, usually I try not to do installations that are smaller than 10 by 10 square foot. That seems to be anything smaller than that. It's like, I'll send you some seeds and you can plant them, and that's nice. But like a pollinator habitat needs to have a bit of a footprint for it to really make an impact and draw in any kind of ecosystem to it. And so, but schools are, there's always 10 or 20 square feet on the side of a building somewhere that they're cool with. Yeah, you can do whatever. And so, but then you followed up with like, I will come regularly throughout the season and we can meet with as many or as few of your students as you want and talk about what's happening here and notice what's happening here. And I think it's so crazy to me to, meet kids who are in Nashville who had no idea, like even inevitably what ends up happening is a teacher or two will put a like bell pepper or a tomato or something in there. And I love that. But what's always crazy to me is meeting these kids that have no idea what a bell pepper on a plant looks like and being flabbergasted. I eat that. Like that's the gross stuff that my parents put on my plate and it's right there on the ground. And then having that like aha moment of like connecting, like this is all connected, right? Like the bell peppers are going to taste better if I grow them myself. They're going to grow better if I have a diverse ecosystem. And I can't have a diverse ecosystem if we just plant, invasive species from Home Depot and Bradford pears and privet and all of that, nonsense stuff that is profitable for big box stores, but isn't really connected with the reality and the lived experience of people in those communities. So it's like, these are super cool. All of our neighbors end up, I think a couple of them were a little like, what are you doing with your front yard at first? And again, by the end of it, they're all like, all of them were sad to see us cut it short at the end of the season, and we didn't completely pull everything down to the ground. And what we did with our front yard, at least, is we cut everything down to about 6 or 7 inches tall. So it's short still. And it's caught a bunch of leaves in there and it's cool. And then we piled all of the stems and stuff in the back under a tarp, and there's stuff living in there for sure. And then we'll process it for seeds any weekend now. I'm just looking for a free one. We'll see.
Yeah, those are kind of a precious commodity, aren't they? Free weekends?
Yeah, I don't really know if I know what those are.
It's been a while.
Yeah,
it's been a minute. I have a question just sort of related to all this, talking about, I don't know, the community and the public adoption and perspectives on some of these things. You do a lot on social media and online, getting your music out there and all that, but talking about some of these issues and talking about native plants. And do you get pushback? Are there people, because people on the internet are jerks, right? There's bad people on the internet, but like, how do you deal with that?
I mean, I think first you have to accept the fact that like there are people out there that don't like pizza and golden retrievers, and they're wrong. They're objectively wrong.
They're wrong.
And that is part of our mental health crisis in America. I'm just kidding. I don't mean to make light of mental health issues, but you can leave this part of the podcast in. No, I think there's something called context collapse that happens online a lot, where people just lose sight of, they may not fully understand what it is you meant by what you said. And they may decide that you meant something different and completely take it out of context. And just the hide for everyone button is your friend, right?
Oh my goodness, yes.
Like at the end of the day, being in music for sure, right? Like you can't please all the people all the time, right? And then being in marketing, part of my job is to figure out who does and who does not like stuff, right? And so I think for me, I've just come to be fine with people who aren't interested in it. There definitely are There's definitely Redditors that are really dead set on having their very weird turf grass that is more expensive than it needs to be to grow in that place in the first place. And, they're just dead set on it. And that's fine. I don't think I am of the belief that I'm going to convince everybody to grow native wildflowers and get rid of their front lawn. I don't think that's the point of it. The point is that, again, do the bottom rungs of the ladder get you to the top or not? And so if I can convince somebody to put in a little patch of coneflowers or to grow, I mean, honestly, I'm a big fan of yarrow, right? If you're in the Southeast, at least, yarrow's rad. If you want ladybugs in your garden, you should plant yarrow, right?
Absolutely.
You can eat it. It is nitrogen fixing. It is middle of winter, or I guess the end of winter. Thankfully, it's still green in our yard, right? It never died back. It's just out there doing its thing. If I can convince people to put some native plants in their yard, that's a win, right? And most of the time, I think that from if you sit down and you break down the logic of it, right? We can talk about the aesthetics and the beauty, and that is the logic for some people, right? Well, right. My yard looks like a wildflower meadow in the middle of nowhere. That's my yard. That's what I like, right? I don't think that native plants have to look 7 feet tall and monstrous and buzzing with bees and wasps and insects. That's not everybody's cup of tea, but they might like a blazing star on the corner of their house. They might like a little bit of Joe Pyeweed in the back of a bed to give some height and some visual interest. They might like, native plants can be really beautiful and really well done and still kind of fit that weird propagandized, American landscape culture that I don't fully understand. But yeah, do people get mad? Sure. When you talk to people off the internet, though, in real life, there's a business around the corner from me that has a big planter out front that I just went in and talked to the manager and was like, what are you doing with that? It's basically an ashtray. Do you like that? And they're like, no, we just don't have time. Most people just don't have the time or the energy or the resources or the know-how to do it. So my big thing is when people are like, how do I do stuff like this? Just go ask, right? Yeah. Go ask somebody, hey, I noticed you've got a planter outside. Do you mind if I plant it for you? And they may say no. And that's the worst that happens.
Yeah, right.
The worst that happens is someone goes, nope, sorry, please leave. All right, see ya. Good luck. Some guerrilla gardening, but I find that it's a little bit of a wasted effort because, number one, there are always unintended consequences of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not a studied academic on it. My goal is to help, not to harm. And I think that oftentimes guerrilla gardening is really well intended, but just asking somebody if you could plant something where something isn't growing is almost always a better strategy than seed bombs don't even work anyways, right?
No,
most
not really.
Seeds did not evolve to be wrapped up in clay and hucked over a fence. Most native seeds, they want to have, I'm going to cuss, you're going to have to cut this out. They want to have their ass to the ground and their face to the sky. And that's just how plants evolved. Most things didn't evolve to get buried several inches in the ground. Vegetables and produce and things like that is a little bit different because it wants to be eaten and then pooped out. Mm-hmm. But native wildflowers and grasses are going to get blown in the wind, or they're going to catch on something's fur or a combination thereof. And so
just need a little soil contact and that's it.
Yeah, that's it. And so you just throw them and walk away.
Well, and it's this concept too, I think, of giving a man a fish or teaching a man to fish, right? If you could go throw some wildflower seeds in an empty lot and that's fine. Or you could, you're doing, talk to the city, talk to people in the neighborhood and be like, here's why we're doing this. And I think we get into this, I just have to do it. It's this almost savior complex sometimes, instead of, I want to build community and I want to and again, I agree with you. I think guerrilla gardening, seed bombs, all that, it's really well intentioned. But I think we're not at that next step of how do I use this to make not just the environment, but the people in that environment happier and healthier and
And
better.
there's so much research that shows that greener spaces in urban environments has better education outcomes. It has a reduction of crime rate. Right? Like there's so many reasons why. Like I just made this huge argument with City of Nashville, and they're putting in 180 trees near our house because crime rate is super high in this part of town, and there are no trees that are acting as heat sinks. Planting plants makes the world a better place. And it is wild to me. That is a hot take. It is wild to me that we haven't figured this out. It is like, did nobody, like, where are all the millennials that grew up on Captain Planet? What happened? So it's, but if you just ask and you make, especially if you want to get involved at the like city level, there are city planners out there and beautification directors and people in your community that are looking for easy wins. Take your ADHD hyperfixation and make a plan and go to them and say, hey, I made this plan. I think that we should put a bunch of trees here and here. And I think that we should use these trees because they're the state tree or they're the native tree or I like this tree or they're not Bradford pears. And this is my plan. These are the locations. I think that these would be great. 9 times out of 10, they'll just look at it and go, as long as your math is right, they'll go, yeah, let's do it. Okay, cool. Yes, done.
You've made something easy for them.
Submit it, right? And that's how it works in like when I'm marketing music. If I'm trying to get somebody to do a write-up on an artist or get an ad to work or whatever, you just have to make a win for them. And so I don't think people don't want more wildflowers. I don't think people don't want a better, safer community. I don't think they don't want their kids to have better outcomes at school. I just think that they forget or don't realize that plants and the community aspect of that is what actually creates that.
Yeah. Super cool. Wow. Like it's such a great conversation. I have a couple of questions as we sort of just wrap up that I like to try to get from my guests. The first is like, where do you see this going? What do you want to do with this? I mean, I know it seems like you've had a lot of success with the Rooey project. And like you said, you're running out of space to plant stuff. Like going forward, do you have like step 2, phase 2, or just to kind of keep doing what you're doing?
I didn't think it would work this well. So I haven't really thought about it of like, what is the next step here with the project? I mean, there are always going to be places to do plants. Obviously, we've got all the schools within a radius of us have stuff. You know, I think maybe the next step is just to start putting stuff on, you know, my wife and I were talking about the other day, maybe I start posting on Nextdoor and saying, hey, do you want me to come do an install in your house? I don't know. I don't know what it is. To those that are listening, if you have an idea, let me know. Find me on the internet. Give me your thoughts. Right now, we're just going to kind of keep on keeping on. I'm trying to put on a song every 6 to 8 weeks as I can. And I'm delivering a song, hopefully, fingers crossed, by the end of the day today. It's all done. I just have to upload it. Not,
Oh, no, I get it.
The top rung of the ladder is sometimes hard to reach.
I get it. That's show notes. That's writing show notes for me.
Yeah.
I'll do all this stuff and I'm like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore.
I think I have like 6 songs that are done and 5 of them need artwork and names. And that's it. And it's like, that's probably like the 20 or 30 minute job. When am I going to find that?
But
yeah, the dopamine's not in it yet.
I understand.
Yeah. When the dopamine is
very well.
Yeah.
Very well.
So I don't know what's next, to be honest.
Okay.
That's
cool
keep
though.
Playing plants.
Love it.
Maybe we'll do trees next.
Yeah. More pawpaws.
Yeah. Pawpaw is actually the next song.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
There's a flower on the tree, right?
Yeah.
It's like a purple triangular kind of stinky flower.
A little bit, but it could be worse.
It could, yeah.
It could be a Bradford pear.
It could be stinkhorn mushrooms.
Oh, God.
We have those in our yard.
Do y'all have, this is a total aside, do you have a buffalo gourd there or stink gourd?
We don't have stink gourd, but I know what stink gourd is, and I'm so glad we don't have to deal with it.
There's a lot of it out here.
No,
like it's native out here.
Mm-mm.
And so in a lot of our native spaces, like it's there, which is great. It's a perennial cucurbit. Those are rare.
Neat.
It's just, no thanks. I'm out.
Not all nature is enjoyable. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Last question I have. If there was like one piece of advice, one thing you'd like our listeners to take from this episode, what would that be? If like you had and it can be about what we've been talking about or anything.
I think that done is better than perfect is probably the thing, right? That there are a lot of projects or things or ideas or, hopes that you might have. And ultimately, don't let this perfect version of it prevent you from even trying and figuring it out. Because whether it's music or whether it's native gardening or whether it's local conservation, 99% of success is just consistently doing the most obvious thing for an uncommonly long period of time without assuming you're smarter than you are.
That's really good advice.
Yeah. And so just do it. Just do it. Even if it's not perfect, cool. That's just the bottom rung of the ladder. And you just keep climbing until you get to the top. You'll get there eventually, but don't let being really, we say this to our kids all the time, is because my kids are like, they're like that, when they try a new sport or we went to a skate park the other day. My son had never been to a skate park, sent him there, and he kept falling. Being bad at stuff is the number one way to get really good. And so done is better than perfect. Just do it, fail at it, take all that failure, use it as feedback, and keep going.
Very cool. Well, Rooey, this has been a lot of fun. I just looked up and it's been almost an hour. This is a great conversation. I know. Where can we find you? Where should we send people?
You can find me I'm usually on Instagram. I'm almost always on Threads. Or you can just go to my website. It's Rooey.co, ROOEY.co.
Okay. Very cool. And you're on Spotify.
I'm on Spotify. I'm on Apple Music. I'm on Tidal. I'm on Yandex. That's a thing. Yandex is like a Russian streaming platform, I think.
Okay.
I didn't know that until I got a royalty check from them. So that's great. So the only place I'm not is like normal radio yet. So I guess call your local radio station and request a Rooey song.
I need some more lo-fi dad jazz.
Yes. Who doesn't?
Yeah. Man, it was a lot of fun. Thanks for being on. Keep doing what you're doing. I love it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Y'all, if there's one thing I took away from this episode, I think it's that we can find such cool intersections and ways to make the world better through our passions, whether that's a love of music, a love of plants, a love of nature, or the conjunction of all those things. Rooey does such a good job of using his gifts and using his talents and using the things he loves to make the world around him better. And I think that's something we could all really do with some more of right now and really take to heart. Thanks again to Rooey for being a part of this, and I hope you'll go check out his music all over the places. Thanks again for listening to Planthropology. I do this for you, and I'm just so grateful that you're a part of it. Thanks again to the Texas Tech Department of Plant and Soil Science. Planthropology is hosted, written, produced, all of those things by yours truly. Our intro and outro music is by the award-winning composer Nick Scout, and our mid-roll music now is by my buddy Rooey. I hope that you are well. I hope that you're enjoying spring. And by the way, happy spring. We're just now getting into it. And I hope that you're being kind to one another. If you have not to this point been kind to one another, it's getting to be more and more of a radical act, and I think that you should give it a shot. Be good, be safe, keep being really cool plant people, and I will talk to you real soon.